Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. However, as I'm sure you're probably aware, this is a very special bonus episode where we're going to look at Netflix's 2024 action comedy, Beverly Hills Cop, Axel F, directed by Mark Molloy, starring Eddie Murphy, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Taylour Paige, Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Paul Reiser, Bronson, Pinchot, and Kevin Bacon. I'm Jesse, I'm your host. Thanks for joining me today for this special bonus episode where we're sitting a little bit over 10 days since the film's come out. So a little bit of commentary around the film and reception on how it's been received. This is obviously one of Netflix's big films. They've brought it out in time for American summer and Independence Day weekend and those types of things. So how's it, held up, I guess, and has it held up to Netflix's expectations of taking on board a very beloved franchise, I guess, is where we're at. So, as always, I will spoil this film as we go. I'm going to talk a lot about the context about how this film actually ended up on Netflix and the story behind why it's taken, 30 years for the fourth film in this series to sort of come out. The other big thing, I guess, that we sort of need to discuss is that there's a big story. It is a big story. A lot of help from the internet on finding out a lot about this story too. So I think it's quite an interesting story that I'm looking forward to share. So spoilers. As we go, we kicked off the show with the Fast Flicks, where I do a quick little summary of what the film's all about. This one is Axel Foley. We know Axel Foley, Eddie Murphy. He's called to action again in Beverly Hills when his friend and daughter get in some trouble. There's not much spoiler in that, really. That's just the basis of the film. Let's get into it. Let's talk about how this ended up on Netflix. So this did have the working title of Beverly Hills Cop 4. Obviously, it's the fourth film. They've gone with the subtext of Axel F instead. Around the world, in Spanish, it's called A Detective Loose in Hollywood. Not bad. In Portuguese, it's called Beverly Hills Cop 4, Axel Foley, so they've gone the full title. In Danish, it's called Naughtier Than the Police Allow, Axel F. Good one. And in Chinese, it's called Beverly Hills Super Detective, Eso Foley. I have no idea why or how that translates into English, but that's where we're at. So this obviously is the fourth installment in the Beverly Hills Cop film series, and it's a sequel to Beverly Hills Cop 3 from 1994. Eddie Murphy, who stars in this as Axel Foley, also produces the film with Judge Reinhold, John Ashton, Paul Reiser, and Bronson Pinchot reprising their roles from the previous films in the franchise, while Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Taylour Paige, and Kevin Bacon all star in new roles. A fourth entry into this series of Beverly Hills Cop was initially announced for release in the mid-1990s, so we're going back a long time, under the production of Eddie Murphy's production company, Eddie Murphy Productions, before the production fizzled out. So we go to June of 2001, when it was announced that Jason Richman had been hired to write a treatment for Beverly Hills Cop 4, after executives were impressed with his rewrites of Bad Company. The film then was re-announced in 2006 when producer Jerry Bruckheimer announced his intention to resurrect the series, though he eventually gave up his option to produce the film, passing the duties to Lorenzo de Bonaventura. We then go to September of 2006, where a script, which was an amalgamation of several earlier drafts, was presented to Murphy, who was reported to be very happy with the outline, or was described as an attempt to recapture the feel of the original film. Murphy admitted one of his motivations for making a fourth film was to make up for the fact that the third film was horrible, and he didn't want to leave the series like that. And we'll talk a little bit about that later in the scenes too. In May of 2008, Rush Hour director Brett Ratner was officially named as the director, promising that the film would return under the series' standard R rating rather than the rumoured watered-down PG-13 version. In July of 2008, Michael Brandt and Derek Haas were hired as screenwriters to improve the existing script and complete a new script under the working title Beverly Hills Cop 2009, which would see Foley return to Beverly Hills to investigate the murder of his friend Billy Rosewood. The script was eventually rejected, leaving Ratner to work on a new idea. In an interview with Empire magazine, Ratner said, "I'm working very hard on the fourth film. It's very difficult, especially since there were three before. We're trying to figure out some important things like where do we start? Is Axel retired? Is he in Beverly Hills? Is he on vacation? Does Judge Reinhold return as the lovable Billy Rosewood? Many questions to figure out, but I'm hoping to have a script before film disappears from our existence." So, although Murphy committed to the project, it was unconfirmed whether the series' other principal actors would return. Ratner stated in late 2009 that he was trying to convince Reinhold and Ashton to reprise their roles, and Harold Faltermeyer's Axel F score would definitely be returning for the proposed fourth installment, with Ratner quoted as saying, "It'll be back, but it'll be a whole new interpretation." We then go to November 15th of 2010, where Ratner stated in an interview with MTV that there was still a possibility that they would make a fourth film, but it wouldn't be anytime soon. We then have to go to October of 2011, where Eddie Murphy discussed a possible fourth film again, saying, "They're not doing it. What I'm trying now to do is to produce a TV show starring Axel Foley's son, and Axel is the chief of police, now in Detroit. I'd do the pilot," he said. "I'd show up here and there. None of the movie scripts were right. It was trying to force the premise. If you have to force something, you shouldn't be doing it," he said. "It was always a rehash of the old thing. It was always wrong." We then go to late summer of 2013, when CBS decided to pass on the TV series. So Paramount decided to move forward with the fourth film. On September 13th, 2013, Jerry Bruckheimer stated he again was in talks to produce, and in December of 2013, it was again announced that Murphy would reprise the role of Axel Foley and Ratner would direct. Murphy was paid $15 million for his involvement. We then go to May of 2014, where Deadline announced that Josh Applebaum and Andre Nemec would write the screenplay. We then go to June of 2014 in an interview with Rolling Stone, where Eddie Murphy discussed returning to the edgier type of character of Axel Foley after years of making family-friendly films. He said, "I haven't done a straight guy, working class, a blue-collar character in ages. So maybe it's like, oh wow, I didn't remember he was able to do that," Murphy said. According to studio reports on the film's plot, Foley would return to Detroit after leaving his job in Beverly Hills, and he will face the coldest winter on record as he navigates the new rules and old enemies of one of America's most tenacious cities. The state of Michigan actually approved $13.5 million in film incentives based on an estimated $56.6 million filmmaking spending in the state. The film would be shot in and around Detroit and was estimated to provide jobs for 352 workers. The film was originally scheduled for a March 2016 release, but on May 2015, Paramount Pictures pulled Beverly Hills Cop 4 from its release schedule due to script concerns. On June 14th, 2016, Deadline Hollywood reported that Adil El Arbi and Bilal Falal, the directors of the Belgian drama Black, would direct the film. We then go to September of 2017, where Arbi and Falal stated their interest in casting Tom Hardy or Channing Tatum to star alongside Murphy. August 2019, the film was described as still in the developmental phase, and then in October of 2019, in an interview with Collider, Eddie Murphy announced that principal photography would begin after the filming of Coming to America. On November 14th, 2019, Deadline Hollywood announced that Paramount Pictures made a one-time license deal with an option for a sequel, which is pretty important, I guess, with Netflix to develop the film. In May of 2020, after delays in the filmmaking business caused by the COVID pandemic, Arbi and Falal confirmed they were still attached as co-directors and that a new screenwriter was working on a script for the film. In April of 2022, Arbi and Falal left the film to focus on Batgirl, and those that know about Batgirl know that they made the whole film and then it was pretty much written off for a tax write-off. But this is when Mark Molloy was hired to replace them. So then we go to February of 2022, where pre-production on the film started and it received a Californian state tax credit of $16 million. Principal photography began on August 29th, 2022 in San Benito, along with other areas of California. It lasted for 58 days and generated $78 million in qualified spending in tax incentives. Additional filming occurred in Detroit in late November and early December 22, although Eddie Murphy did not actually travel to Detroit himself. A December 3rd NHL ice hockey game between the Red Wings and the Vegas Golden Knights at Little Caesars Arena served as a backdrop for the prologue in the film, but the team locker room scene in the film was actually a set. There we go, what a big story. To promote the actual release of the film, there was a promo featuring that animated character Crazy Frog, which most of us would probably be aware of. Crazy Frog was this cover song from, I think, 2005, which uses the Axel F theme. So Netflix getting in, trying all sort of takes to get this film out to a wide variety of people. On June 20th of 2024, the Netflix CEO Ted Sarandos hosted the Beverly Hills restricted premiere at the Beverly Gardens Park. The city of Beverly Hills issued a proclamation honoring Detective Axel Foley. Mayor Lester Friedman presented the honor to producer Jerry Bruckheimer, director Mark Molloy, and Eddie Murphy. Afterwards, the invitation-only guests viewed the film at the Wallace Annenberg Center for the Performing Arts on Santa Monica Boulevard. After premiering on July 3rd on Netflix, the film earned 41 million views in its first 5 days, which is about 80.7 million hours viewed. So pretty big numbers for Netflix. I would say they'd be pretty happy with that. On June 21st, 2024, Eddie Murphy and Jerry Bruckheimer revealed that a fifth Beverly Hills Cop film was already in development. So there we go. In the actual film, this is a little side note, one of the two cops who arrest Axel Foley, where were they? They were down Rodeo Drive in the film. It's actually Eddie Murphy's real-life daughter, Bria Murphy. So that's a nice little side fact too. All right, so as I said, this hit Netflix on the 3rd of July 2024. Cost $150 million to make. That's a lot of money. Filmed, as I said, in Detroit, lots of LA, Rodeo Drive, Chinatown, Beverly Hills. It's already had a win at an award, so one win from this one nomination at the California On Location Awards for Location Team of the Year for a studio feature film. So that's pretty impressive too. What are the critics and audiences saying about this film? On Rotten Tomatoes, this sits at 66% on 181 reviews, so that is just fresh, so solid. The audience a little bit higher, 79%. That's on more than 1,000 ratings. On IMDb, it's got 39,000 ratings. Sits at a 6.6 out of 10, so again, fairly solid. Letterboxd, a 3 out of 5 on that okay side of things. 43,500 ratings, been logged by 51,000 people. And Metacritic, the critics have it at 53 out of 100 on 46 critic reviews. Traffic light system, that is in that yellow section, whereas the audience have it in the green section, sits at a 6.9 out of 10 on 129 reviews. So it seems like audiences are enjoying this more than the critics. What are my thoughts on this film? This was great fun. There are so many moments in this film that remind you of the original films, but it also sits nicely in a current world sort of environment, and it sort of touches on age and progress, especially in characters and situations. So I appreciated that in a reboot, or not a reboot, but it's a direct sequel to a series that was big in the 80s and early 90s. Let's talk about the characters in this film. So Axel Foley, Axel F, we've got to talk about him. Obviously, we know he's this street smart police detective, works as a cop in Detroit. Again, he comes back to Beverly Hills to investigate crimes, and this is especially against a friend and his daughter. And we know that his techniques are unconventional, and this time around, obviously his estranged daughter motivates his work as well as his missing friend. He's still as stubborn as ever, but his tiredness with the job and putting on that persona and age, it's catching up with him, which is a nice little thing that's touched on throughout. Detective Bobby Abbott. We've got to talk about Bobby. Bobby is sort of the new sidekick, I guess, or the new partner that works as a police detective in Beverly Hills. He's the connection, I guess, is that he's not only a cop that he's got to work with, but he's had a past relationship with Axel's daughter, Jane, who we'll talk about in a second as well. They're not together anymore. He's still got clear feelings for Jane. That's where he lies. Does a good job, in this film for a new character in such an old series. And Jane, the daughter, Axel obviously has had very little to do with her throughout her life. She's working in Beverly Hills as a criminal defense attorney and obviously very agitated towards Axel, her dad, most of the film for never being there for her, and also for the fact that everyone keeps comparing her and her traits and her abilities to her father. And she's struggling in this dating scene because we know that she also has feelings for Bobby as he has feelings for her, but because he's a police officer, he reminds her too much of her dad and those common traits of doing whatever it takes to set things right. So I think that's a really interesting little dynamic that they added in it as well. The rest of the film, these are those nostalgia sort of moments, or these cameos where we've got Billy Rosewood, who, retired former partner in Beverly Hills Cop, private investigator, pretty much AWOL the whole film. We've got Chief John Taggart as well. We've got Jeffrey Friedman. These are all people that are, happy to take the fall for Axel, be there in their little moments. Serge, again, this art gallery salesman who pops up. The only other new character, I guess, is Captain Grant, who is this police captain who's working for narcotics. The first moment you see him on screen, this is Kevin Bacon. You know that he's the villain, so there's no surprises there, but I'm not necessarily, disappointed in that either. The director, Mark Molloy, Aussie, Australian, well done. Done a lot of advertisement work, some shorts for Apple, like the brand Apple, and he did a Quibi series too. Quibi. What happened to Quibi? I know that it wasn't a success, but what happened to all that content? Quibi had some okay content on there too. I got to admit, I was a subscriber to Quibi for the few months that it did last. But this is obviously his feature debut, so a big film to give a director for their feature film. Let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes I liked? What are some scenes I didn't like in this film? I think I've sort of touched the opening scene at an ice hockey game. I love ice hockey, so I thought that was great. Especially liked the setup of, this whole scene means nothing to the whole film, realistically, but we have Axel with this cop called Mike, who is obviously his sort of partner in Detroit. And, Mike's just so happy to have him at this ice hockey game. So he's got some alone time with Axel so he can pick his brain on being a cop. And he assumes that because he's black, he doesn't like hockey. And I really like the response from Axel going on about his grandfather being in the Negro Leagues and how dare you. And he was just screwing with him. It was just a real funny start too. The follow-up chase in the snowplow too with Mike and Axel. Even like, as I said, this has no relevance to the film, but it was funny, especially the jokes about Mike being a bad cop and Axel not wanting to get in trouble. So trying to say, Mike's done all the detective work. He's coming through. He's going to be a good cop. I just thought that was funny too. There's a scene where Axel, and this was touched on before too, with Eddie Murphy's daughter playing one of these mall cops, but Axel's arrested. I think it was on Rodeo Drive. And just having a go at them, they've got like one of those little electric sort of police van things that go through shopping centers. And he's like, your car's like a Fisher-Price car, and are you Lego cops? I thought that was funny. And it led into him going to the police station where Bobby, has his first conversation with him, and we see him going through Axel's file, making reference to 1994 not being your finest hour. I thought that was funny straight away, that obviously it's a whack at Beverly Hills Cop 3 not being a very good film. I liked Axel's constant referencing to Bobby and his daughter having intercourse. I thought that played out well throughout the film. There's a scene where Axel is in the car with Jane. She's bailed him out, gets in the car. We know that they don't talk. We know that she doesn't want to be near him. And the Family Affair song by Mary J. Blige plays. That song was one of my favorite songs. I had the single CD of it. I pumped that out. I know all the lyrics to that song. Just the context of the lyrics to the song and Axel singing it, it was great. That was a great little moment, especially when Jane turns it off as well. There's a scene where Axel goes to the car yard with Jane, and the guy at the desk, they make all these jokes about Jupiter's Ascending, the film. I thought that was funny too. I liked Axel having a go at Jane for changing her last name and the effort that must have taken to change her name to Saunders, and he spells out each letter, making it sound bad. She laughed. That was a good scene. And finally, the helicopter scene. That was wild. Just the jokes about Bobby having crash wine and him like freaking out and passing out, and Axel's like, I'm gonna hit you, and they land on this golf course, and then there's a Shooter McGavin cameo, which I thought was great. just so good. The only thing I didn't really like in this scene, the only scene I didn't like in this film, Serge, he takes the crew on a tour of this house so they can sort of suss out the house next door. It was just almost a cameo for cameo's sake. And, I guess his jokes about Bobby and Jane having chemistry were good, but it just didn't add anything to the film, that scene. Themes, ideas. What was this film trying to say? Obviously, the idea of communication and honesty, especially with this family, it's super important, and even more so than just family, but that idea of a parent to a child and finding that right time to talk and apologize and forgive, and that idea that families, they can be complicated. Police corruption obviously plays a big part in this film too, that, the need to do bad things as a police officer when the pay is so poor. You work so hard, you put your life on the line, and you can't even afford to live in the city that you work in. So that's all played on there as well. Obviously, black versus white America too, the differences between Detroit and Beverly Hills. This has been a common thread throughout the films anyway. And I did like that idea of aging too, We see all of these people that were, big stars in films decades ago, and their characters, they're aging physically, mentally, also with those social changes too. That idea of policehood and manhood and respect and all those things tie in quite nicely as well. What did I take away from this film? This is sort of, it shouldn't work. It's one of those films that you go, oh no, not another sequel, remake, reboot, whatever it is. But it does work. It wasn't just that nostalgia trip that we sort of mentioned before. It's got its own story to tell, so I appreciated that in this film as well. Any questions? I think there's just one question of pondering about this film. Billy. Why did they keep Billy alive the whole film? It just seemed like a convenience for the narrative that he could be rescued at the end. I thought one of them possibly was going to die, but no, they kept them all alive. So I guess that's to have that final scene, private investigator scene or undercover scene in the car at the end, like we saw in the original films too. I'm ready to wrap this up. Hope you've enjoyed this chat. We give the films on the Flix Forum a rating out of 5. For me, if you can't sit in your lounge, watch this and enjoy it, there's something wrong with you, because the practical action scenes, they're great, the humor's good, and some of that reminiscing of the past, it all equals a good time. So for me, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5. Solid film for me, 4 out of 5. Netflix doing the right thing with this film. We're on socials. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have X, formerly known as Twitter. The question I just wanted to put out there, based on obviously Eddie Murphy and Jerry Bruckheimer and everyone saying, hey, Netflix signed on with Paramount to have a film with a possible sequel, is Netflix going to prioritize a 5th film now? Is that something that Netflix are going to go, hey, yep, we're in. This has done really well for us. We're good to go with a 5th. In recent days, we've seen that Eddie Murphy's signed on for Shrek 5? Shrek 6? I can't remember. I guess that's not going to take up too much of his time. Just pop into a recording booth to do some lines. But is this going to be a priority for him as well? Is he enjoying playing Axel again? I'm not sure, but hopefully you've enjoyed this chat on the film. As always, we have an episode that comes out every single Monday, so jump on board Monday for our next episode. We do have a huge back catalogue as well, 300, nearly 400 episodes of Netflix original films. So give us a search, give us a listen, give us a like on socials. We appreciate it. As always, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.